Accountability in governance is a complex and multifaceted concept that can be both a powerful tool for promoting good governance and a challenging ideal to achieve in practice. While accountability is often touted as a fundamental right, its implementation can be hindered by various factors, including institutional weaknesses, power imbalances, and lack of citizens' engagement. Power dynamics play a significant role in accountability, as those in positions of power may resist being held accountable or use their influence to evade accountability. Institutional frameworks can either hinder or support accountability depending on their strength and effectiveness. Citizens' participation is crucial for promoting accountability, but it can be challenging to engage citizens in governance processes, particularly in contexts where civic spaces are limited. Is accountability a right, or is it just a burden? This is the Eastern Eye. I'm Alex Ogbodo. Welcome to the Eastern Eye, a program that X-rays the political, social, and economic developments around us. Joining me tonight is Dr. Chikezie Obasi. He's a public affairs analyst. Thank you so much, Dr. Obasi, for joining me tonight.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, and thank you. Good evening, our viewers.
So, typically, each time you hear words about accountability, each time you hear words about good governance, people just cast their minds around politics, typically. But how can Nigeria's government ensure that public officials are held accountable for their actions and decisions, particularly in cases of corruption and abuse of power?
Okay, let's look at it from this. First of all, for the average Nigerian listening to us, let's break down the word accountability. Accountability simply implies owing, to whatever you've done, whether it is right or it is wrong. Having the burden or having the responsibility of explaining what you've done and making sure that you utilize public resources to the best mechanism, putting all economic indices into it and making sure that its efficient management is utilized. And then trying to explain to the public or to the people you are governing why things go wrong. You are not God, you are a human being, but the most important thing is that these decisions we are taking to the best interest of the people. And then at the same time, you try to make amends in case if those people do not accept what you've said. So accountability to me is it reduces the burden on governance, but ensures that transparency. It ensures that there is trust. Imagine your son. I give this example. One day my son was asked to bring a plate. And on his way, he broke the plate. He picked the pieces and came up to say that he broke the plate. My wife wanted, shouted on the boy, wanted to spank him. And I said, no, don't do that. And then told the boy, please go and drop what you have. So when he left, I told my wife, you see, the boy was honest to have come to tell you, I broke the plate. He had been bringing these plates this while, and this one little mistake.
Without incident.
Yes, and he felt bold. I should be able to explain what happened. And then we asked him, how do you make sure that this doesn't really occur again? He thought that he just cleaned it up on the sink and then took it as it was coming down his lips. So we now told him, okay, you need to use, the sink towel to clean it up and dry the water. So you've seen that, yes, the boy was simply accountable. He was able to explain what happened. He was trying to do it in good faith, but for unforeseen circumstances, it fell and broke. Now, assuming the young boy did not come up with that and probably hid the plate, maybe picked the broken pieces and threw it over, across the fence, we may not know, and we would have lost he would have lost the knowing that he should be able to wipe a slippery plate, and he should be able to hold it, and then the kind of plates he should bring if he was asked to bring plates. So that's what accountable is all about. It's not about because you feel you wanted to hide some things, or you feel you want to look as infallible, you feel you want to look as all-knowing, and then you decide not to say what it is like. So what does accountability do? It ensures that there is trust, in governance. It ensures that there is good support. People should be able to support their leaders. Like I said clearly in the illustration I just gave, there was support we gave to the young boy thereafter. We encouraged him to continue what he was doing, and it emboldened him, to take more, do better of. So there's always trust, there's always good governance, and then accountability will ensure that when you're taking any action, you as a leader should look at these actions in every ramification. Politically, is it going to be expedient? Is it going to hasten growth? Are we deploying resources, in the best way that's economically efficient? Are we going to generate employment? Are we going to generally create good governance within the society? Now, you take hold of all these, and then before you deploy the resources, bear in mind that there is this necessity to be open to people to understand what you've done. So you wouldn't want to come explaining yourself in a very bad shape. However, we must say that a lot of impediments, to accountability, like some will tell you on a good note that it might hinder a lot of progress. It brings a lot of criticism. After all, there's nothing you could do with government that people wouldn't find, in government that people wouldn't find something, to say against it, no matter how you look at it. Some will tell you that some leaders might not dare to take some difficult difficult decisions. And then some will tell you that it will enhance their openness to governance, may enhance, may increase bureaucracy, lagging back governance. However, scholars have understood that lack of accountability in Nigeria can be traced back to, self-aggrandizement in governance, where people feel they want something personal. So for that reason, they shouldn't be transparent. They shouldn't have to explain to people. They assume the all-knowing, leadership, be governor, be the president, So, and then because the corrupt tendencies of our leaders make accountability difficult, they rather see it as a burden, that they should, why should I explain to these people when they bring up all manners? More recently, we are seeing a situation where even the immediate constituency that should have been, questioning and bringing our leaders to account, which is the legislature. We've seen that across the federation, the 36 states of the House of Assembly are completely no longer there. We could say clearly that as the day goes by, the National Assembly or the State Assembly continues to diminish in the holding leaders accountable. So you find that the institutions like judiciary, the police, the EFCC, those that could actually put a satellite beam for the populace are being compromised. So there's this distrust across the federation. I was discussing with my friend today, and he was shocked. I told him, between Nigeria and US, which country is safer? He said, of course, US. I said, why do you think so? He told me, can't you hear the killings going on in Nigeria? I said, so the killings are enough, to make you feel that Nigeria is less safe. And he said, yes, he's quite sure what he was saying. I said, let's go by the analysis. Now, I said, in 2024, I know over 40,000 US citizens were killed. He doubted it and Googled, and they saw in 2023 that 47,000 US citizens were killed by gun violence. So he was surprised. And I asked him, are you sure? He said, are you sure that more of that number was killed in Nigeria? I said, no problems. Let's break it down clearly. So I now said, let me use 40,000 as a whole. And I said 40,000 over 365 days. And we saw 109 persons killed per day. Immediately I said, 109 persons killed per day in Nigeria. He said, no, it's not possible. It cannot be true. And I said, but you said that US is safer. Say, do you understand what it means to be killing 109 persons every day in Nigeria? So at the point he now paused and said, but how is it that this Nigerian feels unsafe compared to US? I said, this is the role of government trying to be accountable. When killings are done, like we saw in Kick last time, we saw that the police, everybody, continuously did something and restored the confidence of the average U.S. citizen. So that's what accountability, could lead to. In as much as there are inadequacies in the system, accountability will bring the populace to be fully aware of what you are doing in the government. And then we'll make them to, to respond accordingly. We'll make them to build trust. We'll make them to know that this is a collective survival that you want to do. And not like you are leading, those you are leading, and they are doing what they are doing.
And now that you've mentioned the people, what role can citizens' engagement and participation play in promoting accountability in governance, especially in Nigeria? I mean, typically, how can citizens be empowered to demand accountability from their leaders?
So the first question is, who will empower the citizens? Of course, all over the world. The leaders can never empower the citizens. That's the truth. Leaders are not known to be empowering this. In fact, if they have a mechanism of making all of us to sleep while they loot the treasury, they'll be happier. It's across the world. However, people have been known to organizing themselves to request for what they want. Part of the accountability process is a routine, electioneering process where the leaders present themselves to either endorse them or to say it's time for us to say no. That's one of the first process. And for me in Nigeria, that's one process that has actually dealt a heavy blow, especially the youths. In the last this continuous voter registration that we're going on, we saw in the southeast, was it in Enugu State, we saw just about 1,000 plus, people trying to register, afresh. And now it get me worried. I said, how did we degenerate? And when I sampled some opinion, people say the one they voted last time did amount to anything. I said, but how do you say it didn't amount? They said, the one who voted, did they count the vote? I said, let's wait possible. Who did you vote at National Assembly? Said the senator. I said, the guy I was talking with is from Enugu East. And I said, so who won in the Senate? He said, the Labour Party candidate. I said, fine. Was it your choice? He said, yes. I said, did you see that he was voted? And I asked him again, the House of Assembly, who did you vote? It's a National Assembly. Who did you vote? He told me, Naji, the guy in the House of Reps now. I said, was it your choice? He said, yes. I said, is he there now? He said, yes. I said, who did you vote? And we went down to the House of Assembly. And then he realized that the person those he voted were the people that won the election. And I asked him another question. Why do you think the process was wrong? He said, because the presidential election didn't, move their way. And I said, okay, fine. If we go by, self-determination and self-reliance, you casted your ballot across 4 processes: National Senate, House of Assembly, National House of Rep, the Guba, and they all went your way. And then the 5th one, the presidency, didn't go your way. And you are using the presidency to denigrate the system. I said, that's not right. Now, this is where the citizen ought to understand clearly. And even when the process is not right, it is a collective effort that the process must be right. Like I keep telling my colleagues, I say, Nigeria as a country is an abstract noun. What makes it a concrete noun is that there's one man called Alex. He is one over 230 million Nigerians who actually make Nigeria a concrete noun. So when you say Nigeria is poor, it means Alex, Obasi, and so on. We are poor. Nigeria as a name is not really poor. So it is those that live in it. So if we really want the country to grow, the citizen must participate. I was listening to, and I wish many of us should take a just 30 minutes video. It's on YouTube of Aliko Dangote. He made a press conference I think before yesterday.
That's right.
And that press conference, to me, was full of patriotism. He said clearly, if we do not invest in our country, who do you think we invest in? So, and Aliko Dangote is a citizen. You could hear him talk clearly that the responsibility of the citizen. He said that factories are taken over by the churches. and then people where they gather and do some other thing. So he was talking about the irresponsibility of the citizen for, to do their own part and demand for better mechanisms. So what is Aliko Dangote saying? He said clearly that he knows 1 or 2 persons that has more liquid cash.
More than he does.
More than he does. But he's not interested.
But he will not mention.
We will not mention. And so for those of us who could see a citizen of the country who, has looked beyond myself, what can I do to impact positively, to this country? What can I do to leave a better legacy? You could see a man, he said clearly that when he was talking about the engineers, he said the engineers they trained, but he gave it to the Indian man.
Yeah, many of them are now
in India.
United Arab
Emirates. So he said they are not expatriates. Yes. But he said one thing again that was painful. He said, when we finish training them, we didn't have off-takers that would do that. And he mentioned Tony Lumelo and so on. So what he was trying to say is that why there are people in governance, you are your own little way. What have you done? Have you been accountable to yourself as a citizen? Have you said, can you say, if we look at this leadership we have in a country, that have participated in such a way that we say we promote the leadership? Have you said in such a way that you as a citizen, you've done your bit? People kept complaining that voting, which is the easiest mechanism you can hold, this constitutional rule, that everybody, up to the age, should be able to cast the ballot. But on the very day of the election, you will see so many of us come to 27, drinking pami, drinking beer, without casting their ballot. So that's one area. The second mechanism of accountability is what I would say social media has popularized. You see, governance had become so close to us today. Days are gone when news will only be heard from BBC, days after the news, broke. For example, I remember when, if you hear anything from Radio Nigeria or NTA, somebody will say, let us hear from BBC or CNN or, VOA to know that authenticate the news. Today, we see that news fly as the minute goes, and people have gone to do. You could say these in-depth analysis. These are mature analysis, but we've seen that news are covered from various dimensions, by people. People who bring their own view. So again, have you been able to listen to this news to see what your responsibility should be? Have you voiced out your own statement, voice? Have you participated even on ordinary radio program, television program, phone-in program? Have you said your own, mind? Or are you still believing that government is meant for them and where they here not be for us? So again, participating in social media, talking community, what I call community conversation. Have you been able to do that? Did you participate in any of those? Can you critically analyze what's going on in governance? When you do not do that, you're not promoting accountability. I know the government of Enugu State in the last 1 year, people will say a lot of bashes had come. And people are trying as much as they could to hold the government accountable. And I'm pretty sure that the feedback goes back to governors, and the people that are leading the state to be sure that they should do something, better off than they met. So that's number 2. Then number 3, which I do not promote, but if it needs comes, that is, you can't take it away. If there are demonstrations which are civil rights, can you participate in that? I've listened to people who say they cannot participate in demonstration. The one I do not agree is violent demonstration that could destroy. But when it comes to peaceful demonstration, it is enshrined in our constitution. People should be able to demonstrate. It is not sitting down and saying that those that are demonstrating, those that are leading demonstration, that they've been bribed. No. A typical example. Last 3 weeks, we saw Nepal government collapse. And the citizens woke up and said, you see, you cannot ban our social media. Who are you to do that? And from there, it ended up, let's end the government. And then we saw the leadership of the government, move. More recently, we're beginning to see uprising. The prime minister in France the other day resigned because the National Assembly members in unison, told him, you have to go. They voted down his measures. And so these are issues I think people should participate. Then can you stand up again to hold on your rights? If you see a bill Can you know the laws? For example, some of us who are, what would I say, who are drivers, if you are driving license and your vehicle license is up to date, you can stand and ask an MOT man, why did you do what is wrong? Can you stand and talk to the nearest person, the teacher, the medical doctor? I am one. Doctor, the way you are handling us is not right. So citizens have a right, and that is why people will say it looks as if Americans are arrogant. They are not arrogant. They are just playing their citizen role. And then that brings about efficiency. That, everybody, because when we talk about governance, we say at any level you find yourself, you might be saying the government is not doing well, but in your office, you are HOD, you're in the office where you are working, so you are part of the government. So can you be bold, to confront and, tell the person that is doing the wrong thing that what you're doing is wrong. So the citizens have a lot of roles to play, when it comes to accountability.
That's right. But there are institutional frameworks, such as the judiciary, the anti-corruption agencies. How can they be strengthened to support accountability and good governance? I'm sure you've heard this before. Even the National Assembly, because they are the ones that are meant to check the executive. Do you see a lot of this? And of course, do you see the role of the judiciary, especially when it comes to rule adjudication?
Okay, let me explain this clearer, because one night I started to think. I said, is there a difference between the judiciary and the executive? I came to the conclusion there is none. Why? We are told there are three arms of government. So there's a government and governing the citizens. And there are three arms in three of them, like we have the Trinity. And the legislators make the law, which the executive will execute. And in case there's any difficulty, the judiciary will interpret when these two people go wrong. So when there's no trouble, it means that these three people, they can, stay in the same room and decide on how to deal with the people on the other side. Yes, there is separation of power. Some other student of government will tell me that. But to what extent has the separation of power become effective in Africa and countries that are developing in terms of democracy? The truth of the matter is we have weak judiciary and the House of Assembly, or the National Assembly members. These assembly members who should have been up, asking for accountability are noted to be people looking for the works of executive. That is the problem. Now you see an assembly member, a National Assembly, State Assembly member, talking about constituency projects, talking about I need this contractor to do the work. So he is now a lawmaker at the same time.
But who is fueling that? Because, pardon me for interrupting you, if somebody is running to be a member representing his constituency at the State Assembly or House of Representatives or even the Senate, the people still make demands of them. Let me put it concretely, especially in the Igbo language. The question is, what will you do for us? The question isn't whether you will make good laws for us or whether you will represent us well. The point that people who have been to the House of Reps, who have done constituency projects, and the people benefited something much more tangible. So you are at risk of having to go into some kind of comparison that will make you look like you are not doing anything there.
So it unfortunately, it started with Obasanjo, in a bid to corrupt the National Assembly. They introduced the so-called constituency projects. And this constituency project, which ought to be executed by the federal government, executive arm, and what it ought to be is you map out a project in your area. The relevant ministry would execute such projects, and then you make sure that those projects were neatly done. That is the aim. So it's like trying to bring governance, make sure that governance come closer. But what have we gotten these days? These projects, executed by the same House of Rep, Senator, House of Assembly member. So the executive clearly understands that you have to undermine their integrity. You give them the banana peel. They lick the banana, and then they won't stand again to ask you for accountability. And that's a very terrible one. On the side of judiciary, we've seen where the governors the president actually had utilized judiciary as a willing tool. What do we see these days? A situation whereby the governor decides who becomes the judges in the state, friends and well-wishers of the governors will bring their own sibs, their own friends to make judges. So the system is already corrupt before the person becomes a judge. Now, we've seen more recently where the FCT minister agrees that he's going to build duplexes for the judges. I mean, there should have been independency of the judiciary. So what's going on? So you discover that our governors have not led the judiciary to be independent. The cronies of judiciary are people that have been dining and whining with our politicians in the executive, and some of them have gone to the point that they are either married, bedmates, friends, family members of those in the executive, who actually got into where they are or where they were because of the magnanimity of the man in the executive. So that's why I began by saying, can we separate these three persons? So the system we are operating today makes it difficult to be separable. For you to become a speaker at the state level, even at national level, people will be looking at who did the governor endorse. For you to even pick a form in any political party, they will say, can we ask the leader of the party? Who is the leader of the party? The state governor. Who is the leader of the National Assembly? The president of the party at the national level is the president. So you see, if the governor does not want you, he will ordinarily not tell you, he will tell you don't need to pick a form. Just wait for your own time. So you discover that from in the inception, the system is just separated to the views, our own views. But in the real sense, the system is not separated. Now, because the system had been corrupted, quote unquote, so that the other arms that should have worked, like the EFCC, the ICPC, the police, or every other relevant agency, now goes cap in hand, begging the leader at whatever level where they are, to enable them breathe to work. So they are already compromised. You can imagine that you might be a police officer doing a case, and this instruction you want to hear is order from above that you should drop the case. And who actually instructed the dropping of the case? Probably a politician. So it becomes a very difficult one. That's why I tell people that you need good leadership, patriotic one, to begin to see that the system will work. But on our own side, as the followers, I can tell you that it is not a new thing. The French Revolution was carried out by the middle class. They had to sack the bourgeoisie, to enthrone what I called those that they wanted, and of course it worked. So for me, the system that should be able to check these governors, check the executive, bring accountability to people, have been compromised. And I can tell you, they're on the same bed. Three of them, these three Siemens twins, the executive, judiciary, they are simply on the same pedestrian with one another.
All right, we'll take a break at this point. When we return, we will talk about Rivers State. Finally, the emergency rule ended today. So similarly, Fubara will be returning to the Port Harcourt Government House out there to assume his duties as governor of Rivers State. That's when we come back. I'll get the take of Dr. Obasi Chikezie. Stay with us. You're welcome back to the Eastern Eye here on Afia TV, a program that x-rays the political, social, and economic developments around us. So, President Bola Tinubu has announced the end of the 6-month state of emergency in Rivers State, effective midnight of September 17th. The emergency was declared on March 18th, 2025, due to a constitutional impasse between the governor and the House of Assembly, which led to a breakdown in governance, according to what they decided there. Now, the president cited the Supreme Court's judgment that there was no functioning government in Rivers State with a new spirit of understanding among stakeholders. And President Tinubu had declared the emergency over, allowing governor and deputy governor and members of the House of Assembly to resume work on September 18th, 2025. There you have it. They say whatever has a beginning will have an end. So just like yesterday, 6 months have come and gone. So what's your take? Fubara is going back Do you think any lessons have been learned?
First of all, many people may not like what I will say, but I have to say it. I think I must commend Mr. President to a reasonable extent for not allowing that state to burn down. The state came to a point of impasse where the Supreme Court had passed a verdict that the governor breached the Constitution. The governor, on the other side, has the sympathy of the masses, that he was being, victimized by his, benefactor, his godfather, political godfather. And the masses, we are oblivious of the Supreme Court ruling. And then the State of Assembly, we are armed with all the legalities to throw in the governor, out of government house, including utilizing, every means possible. The erstwhile governor of the state, the political benefactor, had actually set machineries in motion to actually do that, either by hook or by crook. The Supreme Court had actually empowered the House of Assembly to sit, without interference of the governor. So already the state was charged. For politicians who understand, the students of political analysis, would understand clearly that the atmosphere was not good for that state. Remember, before that removal, Wike had started frequenting Rivers State. In fact, there was a point where he was told he cannot come to Rivers. He had to drive into Rivers State with full entourage and then declare that he was, I think, Krika local government at that time. And he had this, I believe that he would have his way. Because they were armed with the other side, they were on the right side of the courts, and it was really bad. On the other side, the governor himself didn't know clearly the political terrain he walked into. I think he walked into landmines, and then detonating those landmines actually dealt a heavy blow on him. In the first instance, he had no 2024 budget. The state government didn't have a 2024 budget that was fully executed. Because if you remember, the National Assembly, the court had asked him to go back and represent that budget. And then the House of Assembly asked him to present 2025 budget. So what it simply implied was that if he had bought the 2025 budget, they would have asked him what happened to 2024 money. And that is where the anarchy would, explode. And they will cite to him that you don't execute any government, fund without appropriation. And by virtue of Supreme Court judgment, there was no appropriation for 2024 budget. So I think Mr. President looked into that, having understood clearly that he was going to have some very big problem. And that problem would lead, probably the people might go back to creek. You see a lot of vandalism, killings, political, thuggery and so on. The best bet was to keep the state, at abeyance. Unfortunately to Fubara, because he is a light-feathered weight when it comes to politics of Nigeria today, that favored Wike and his group, because they were armed with a Supreme Court judgment that even to tomorrow, if you activate it, is enough to throw Fubara out. So they need to have this, a timeout, for everybody to go back and understand the problem. And I must commend Fubara again. The maturity exhibited during that period. He asked everybody to sheath the sword and went back to his political benefactor, to settle amicably, quote unquote, amicably. Because I remember that when Wike was being asked by a panel of journalists, he simply told them that the details of what they discussed should be unknown to everybody. That they that were in the room knows what they discussed, and that they believed that was going to bring a lasting peace to Rivers State. Now, a little bit digression. People might be thinking, I remembered so many occasions I said that the problem with Rivers State was not really the case of how much are you giving Wike, as meant to be, to be believed, but as Fubara or the stakeholders in the state had made many of us to believe. The issue was a very clear thing, 2031. What is the way forward for Wike and the boys that came with him? Fubara, on his own side, didn't understudy 48 laws of power. I believe that this opportunity would have made him to read a lot of books about power. And the first law is do not outsmart your boss, And if you must go to outsmarting him, you must be sure you eliminate him. Now, it simply means if you want to attempt outsmarting him, you will be rest assured that he must be eliminated. Otherwise, if you fail, your case is gone for. And that's exactly what happened to Wike. If not for the intervention of Mr. President, they would have gone all ahead, to making sure that they crush him politically. And for some people whom I was discussing with you, I said, by political calculation, Wike's voice may not allow Fubara, to win a re-election bid. He might not even contest again. Because as it is today, they've effectively, held down the political structure in Rivers State. I mean, the local government areas are completely in the hands of that group. The House of Assembly members are completely in the hands of that group. So in a politics, I think what Fubara should be able to do is to walk back to the family where he belongs to.
So, but typically now, if Fubara goes back to the government house tomorrow, do you think that Abuja interference will continue? Will all his problems be solved with this 6 months hiatus? Is it possible that whatever it is that created that problem, that made him stay in a suspension for 6 months, have all those problems gone away? Or are they going to have they evolved waiting for him?
No, I believe that. Remember when Mr. President, mentioned that suspension? He said that was in the first instance. So what it means, if there was no truce, that suspension will continue. But Mr. President wouldn't want crisis in that state. That state is the engine house, housing the economy of Nigeria. So you may not want the Mr. President, if Mr. President was not fully aware that to a reasonable extent that peace or resolution that is, good for both parties had reached, he would have not allowed that. Secondly, how did he make that? I think he made it clear that it was Wike and Fubara that should come to visit him, holding hand in hand and agreeing that they've reached a consensus, and not him mediating between them. So they reached a consensus by themselves. But those that had their ears, it was stated that in the first time it was difficult for them to reach, but at a point they agreed, to meet. So I believe that first, Fubara is not, I've always maintained this, that Fubara is like Peter in the Bible, who Jesus Christ has, chose all the disciples, turned one day and said, Peter, you see this flock, you have to lead them. So there was no new, group that Peter formed, other than saying, okay, Jesus, since you are moving, let me now look after. So the mantle that Jesus had, Peter took it. The unfortunate thing with Fubara was that when he was under the devil a mantle, he felt this mantle, these people do not belong to me. So let me form my own political structure. And that's where he had a problem. So the disciples of Jesus Christ, if Peter had said, I wanted to form my own group, decided that, look, we can't allow you to be. And even in that circumstance, even if Jesus Christ, had no powers, the disciples working against Peter would have actually empowered Jesus. So what am I trying to point out here? Because those that came with Fubara, the equal members of, with Fubara, for some of us that understood clearly how Fubara was made the governor, those that were there, that wanted Fubara to be there, who are equal stakeholders, who do not see Fubara as having possessed the greatest political power, we are stunned when Fubara began to look for his own political structure, eliminating them. And they looked at, I keep saying, it was the survival of the fittest. Among the elect committee, Speaker of the House, he found out that Fubara was plotting to, see him out of the House. So the issue that they simply quickly did was a very simple thing. I mean, if we allow this man, he will throw all of us under the bus. So the best bet is to rally and fight him. And that's what they did. And then that was where Wike now found strength. If those guys were with Fubara, Wike wouldn't have done anything. So why do I say I don't think there's a problem here. To a reasonable extent, unless he has not learned the political, the rope of politics. At the point he told people that everybody calling himself Fubara's own aide should be disbanded. That is not, it doesn't have anything like that. People should be talking about government of Rivers State. I believe that these 6 months would have availed him to understanding the fact that one, we are Accountant General to this Wike, your boss, and those other members that came, to that, they were in that government, including Amawule. As Accountant General of the state, you are disbursing funds to them. And then again, that for the greater part of the electoral campaign, it is these men that went ahead campaigning for you without even knowing you. He didn't appear in much of the campaign rallies. And then when EFCC was looking for him, he was, watered in the government house or under the custody of Wike to make sure that he evaded the long arm of the EFCC. So I believe that it would have been clearer to him that the comfort room he has is back to that house.
That's right.
So if you understand it from that perspective, he will know that he's like a Peter who should look after the flock and not allow the flock he was asked to look after and start looking for a new set of flocks. If he doesn't understand that by this time, I think he would be making a very terrible mistake.
So, I mean, how should Rivers people be feeling now that the emergency rule is over? Do you think that they had a hard time with the emergency rule?
Of course, the emergency rule has its own merits and demerits. Psychologically, it impacted heavily. It's an insult to an average Rivers man that one day somebody, as a national administrator, as old as that state was, Rivers was carved out before 1970, as old as that state was, in a democratic dispensation, as rich as they are, diverse as they are, politically connected as they are, they could be ruled by, an administrator from another state, not even from the state. But their matter should be taken to the National Assembly to decide, and the elections were conducted by those who are not, who were not really endorsed by them. So I don't think it would be right, the psychology of an average Rivers man. Then the other issue is accountability of what transpired within that 6 months. As what was Obasi? What did he do with the money? Was he able to, justify the money that was given to him? Would somebody say that Obasi utilized the money in an efficient manner that benefited with Rivers people? That is left to be seen in the days ahead. But one thing I believe that if an average Rivers man, and I believe the governor should be able to deploy all missionaries, is to tell everybody that we are one River State, we will have our differences, but let's move forward. That way, he would have actually given back the psychological, trauma the state had. It would have brought them back. And then, for those who are with Wike, in the words of our former president, former head of state, Gowon, he said there was no victor, no vanquished. I don't think this is time for any of them to begin to blow trumpets as if there's a victor. They are all the same people of Rivers. Fubara is the first son of that family. I mean, the Wike and his dynasty. They should still see him as such and then begin to work with him for the betterment of Rivers people.
For the betterment of Rivers people. And I have to thank you so much, Dr. Obasi Chikezie, for coming on the Eastern Eye tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And that's the Eastern Eye for tonight. We'll be here tomorrow, same time, for another episode of the program. My name is Alex Ogbodo. Good night.